So I was at the local restore when I got really excited when I spotted these. It is base molding, but it is made out of walnut and marked $10 a piece. There were like 6 10-foot pieces there, and I cut a little more manageable piece off. It has kind of some weird shapes on it, but there's a chunk of wood right in here that's very nice, and thought it'd be great for making some kind of crafts or projects with. And so today I'm going to be making coasters. Took the whole boards like this to the table saw. A few minutes later I ended up with these pieces, which I don't know what I'm going to do with these yet, but also ended up with this nice just square boards. The coasters I want to make are larger than this, but I'm going to show you some tips to deal with that. You could probably make this with jigsaws or table saws or less fancy equipment, but today I'm going with the CNC. I don't own a CNC, and I'm definitely not an expert at them, but I did have access to a couple of machines. One is at the high school I used to work at. The other is at a place called Make Roanoke, where I'm a member. And I've only done about 3 projects on these. So I'm going to make mistakes along the way. But in the end, I was able to get this project done, and I'm pretty happy with the results. So when I broke down that base molding, I ended up with boards that weren't quite wide enough to be coasters. I want the coasters to be about 4 inches wide, and they were like 2.5, a little less than 3. So I'm showing you a technique here with the materials I had. I don't have a joiner, don't have a planer, but I do have a bandsaw at this location. So what I'm doing is I'm hot gluing 2 pieces of wood together. The third short block of walnut there is just to get the height right. But I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to take it to the bandsaw, and then I'm going to cut through both that maple and that walnut at the same time. And I can do whatever shape I want. I'm going just kind of like a slow zigzag shape here. And when I'm done with this cut, since it's cut both at the same time, they will match up perfectly. I really didn't want the 2-colored wood, but I was doing it so it'd be obvious for demonstration purposes here to show you how this technique works. Earlier I cut some walnut boards and glued them up in order to make 5-inch wide pieces of walnut. So now that I've made the cut, I can gather up the pieces, carry them over to the workbench. And the glue's not too hard to pop apart at this point. But now look at how nicely that maple matches up with that piece of walnut. And footage of me peeling hot glue off of boards is always a viewer favorite. You end up with 2 boards though. I got the wider one there and then this kind of useless skinny one. But depending on what you were doing, you could end up using both boards. So now I need G-code in order to send to the CNC to cut the coaster out. I'm at the site easel.com, which is a browser-based software that lets you create G-code. First step is you need to set up the material to be the size of the material you're going to load into the CNC. So I'm going to put approximate height, width. I told it that it's walnut. One of your most important measurements here is going to be that thickness. When you cut the coaster free from the rest of the board, it actually goes all the way through the thickness. So if you made it too thick or too thin, you could cut too far down into your wasteboard, or you could not cut the coaster completely free. So I added a square, trying to remember how to round the corners now. Rounded them way too much. Starting to look a little bit better. Now I like the coaster to be about 4 inches across. Moving it closer to the bottom left side of the board. Alright, got the shape how I want it. Now I need to go to the cut. I don't want it to just cut out that shape. What I want it to do is cut along the border of that shape. So I've picked the cut outside the line. And now I want it to cut all the way through so the coaster will come loose. So I'm going to set it to 0.7, which is how thick I said the wood was. Notice there's little tabs that kind of automatically appeared in yellow. Those are so the workpiece doesn't come loose once it's cut free. Now I want like a shallow circle impression in the middle where the drink sits. So I'm playing with the size to get a circle that looks good. Now if I drag and select both of them, there's this function that lets me line up the objects together. So now my circle's all centered nicely. I'm going to move it back over closer to that bottom left edge. Now I'm checking the cut depth. This time I wanted a pocket, so it's going to cut out the circle shape. And then I'm deciding how deep I want to cut the circle. A key concept of CNC is the location of the origin. If you see that little block with the 5 dots in it, I chose the bottom left one. So when I zero the CNC machine, I'm going to touch it to the bottom left corner of the board. I saved the file name as coasters bottom left to remind me that that's the position. So the CNC beside me is a Denford machine. It is really old and there's not a lot of information about how to use it, but it's what I had access to. The software on the screen is their proprietary software and it's pretty difficult to use. First thing I need to do is I'm jogging the drill bit to the left right now, and I'm lining it up with that corner of the board. The board has been placed in there on some double-sided sticky tape, and there's a wasteboard underneath it so you don't cut into the metal by accident. So in a second I'm going to get out of my seat and check to make sure it's visually lined up with the bottom left corner of the board. And so that router tip is right there where I want to start my cut. Don't know what I'm looking at right here. But now I'm going to zero the machine to that location in the X, Y, and Z axis. Going to load the G code now. One thing that's a little tricky is when you export it from easel, it comes as a NC file, and I had to change it to a .fnc file, which is a Denford thing, I guess. Got to remember to turn the spindle on. Gives you a bunch of warnings telling you you're about to actually cut stuff. And I hit play, so it's going to go to action making the cut. The machine's running. It makes a pretty wild humming noise. Now that the cut's done, I'm just raising the spindle higher and then moving the workpiece forward in the machine so I can get to it easier. There is a way to rig a vacuum hose that goes in and hooks into that red piece automatically and then goes up out the top left side of the machine, but we don't have that hooked up, so it just builds up sawdust until you're done, and then you got a lot of vacuuming to do. So holding the coasters down was some of that sticky tape, and then it also cut it with those tabs in it. I just pried it out with a screwdriver, breaking the tabs. It may have been a good idea for me to use a chisel or a multi-tool to cut those tabs. It got the job done though. Even better than watching me peel off glue is watching me peel off tape. You can see on that coaster one of the tabs didn't break too nicely and splintered the bottom of the coaster a little bit. Hopefully the router is going to clean that up. I didn't have a router table, which would have been easier, so instead I'm just putting the handheld router into the vise. I've got a chamfer bit installed, and it's just barely exposed to take the corners off. You probably could have used sandpaper at this step just as well. I don't have any of this stuff in my basement, but if I got a laser cutter sitting right there, it's really nice. You can put anything you'd like, names, logos, designs, sports things. You don't have to worry too much about copywriting as long as you're not selling it. And so I'm going with a shark design here. All that's left is some sanding and a little bit of finish. So some of these I finished with tung oil, and then some I did with this Minwax wood finish. Some pictures of the final product are coming up. If you've watched this far, I really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would hit the like button and the subscribe button. If you can get access to a CNC machine somewhere, these coasters are a great little starter project.